In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove and replace an oil pan on a Ford Ranger with a 3.0 liter located on the bottom half of the engine. Disconnect the negative first, and that's going to be a 13 millimeter or ½ inch. Well, particularly ours is because it's a universal terminal end. If it's a factory, it's more than likely going to be an 8 millimeter. So we're going to take that negative off, set it aside, make sure it doesn't touch the positive in any way, and now we're safe to start our work. Now we're going to take the starter out, and there's 3 mounting bolts right here. One, then one up there, and then the last one right here. 13 millimeter socket, and you're going to need an extension with a swivel to get to that top one. Let's see if we can get it in there. There we go. Let's see if we can just snap it free. Okay, let's move on to the second one. All right, now that all 3 bolts are free, I'll get my electric gun and we'll zip them right out. Wonderful. All right, all 3 bolts, you can measure them, they're all the same size, but just confirm. Now we'll grab that starter, and we can disconnect that cable. All right, so I'm going to take the starter, and I'm going to flip it this way so I can easily access the cables. So I'm going to disconnect the solenoid wire first. That's the smaller of the 2, and that's a 10 millimeter socket. Break that off. Grab that. The new one comes with washer and nut, so we don't have to worry about that. And then we'll take that positive wire off. That's the larger top one, 13 millimeter socket. Grab that cable. We're definitely going to clean this up before we put the starter back in. These wires are pretty corroded. And then just let's weasel this out. So I'm going to drain the oil before I take the pan down. 5/8 wrench, and we're going to loosen up that drain plug. And now we'll just seal that back up. Because the pan's coming down, we don't have to drain it 100%. It's not an oil change. Although it is, right? I'm just going to snug it because I don't want oil dripping on me. So now we have to drop this differential, front differential, down about 2 inches. So we just have to unmount it. It has 3 mounting bolts, and I'm going to use a pole jack to support the front differential. Just going to snug it, and now I can get my 13 millimeter socket with an extension, and I'm going to do the most forward one first. That's the most difficult one to see. Okay, we're going to drop the differential just a hair so I can take some tension off of that and see if I can slide it out the rest of the way. There we go. Set that aside with the matching nut. Now the last 2 mounting bolts are so much easier to get to. So I'm going to go over to the passenger side one, get this one. Let's put a little tension on that. See if we can lift it up. Okay, last one is the one over here by the drive shaft. All right, now let's lower this and see how much we get. Bring it right down onto the CV axles, right onto those torsion bars. And there she sits. We can get that pole out of the way. It doesn't look like it's going to do much right now. Always going to want to mark your drive shaft before you take it off, especially if you're not replacing it on the rear and on the front part. So we'll do the front also. And that helps with future vibration, all the above. So the bolts for this drive shaft is a 12.12 millimeter socket. They do make a specialty socket, but you can get away with a 12-point socket. And then make sure your vehicle's in neutral. Now I'm going to move to the front, leave one here, and then I can take one off, and then the last one. Probably going to leave it like that. You never want a drive shaft to fall down on your head. Same on that. And then you get a pry bar and pull it away from the yoke. Okay. Making sure you're clear from the drive shaft. We're just going to give it a couple of taps. See if we can break it free. There we go. Now move to the front one, do the same. And there it is. Rear part first, rear shaft. Now I can support the shaft and take that bolt out. So now we're going to take this cross shield down. It's just 4 10 millimeter socket bolts, 2 on the side and 2 on the other. So now we're going to mark the front differential drive shaft, where it goes into the yoke. And I'm going to get the cap too. Get yourself some tape ready. Also, I use electrical tape. You can use duct tape or anything you want. Because once you pull this, once these caps come off and you pull this drive shaft out, you're going to want to tape the 2 ends on that U-joint because you don't want the bearings to fall off. So let's go. T30, we'll take these lovely little cap screws out. Set it aside. Holding onto the drive shaft, just take a pry bar and put it in there where that yoke is, pop it out like that. Make sure those caps don't move. Should have enough gap to it so you can pull it down. Now with your tape, you want to loop that around, shall I say. You'll see what I mean by on the caps. You don't want those caps falling out, those little needle bearings. Ooh, they go everywhere. Once they go, it's not fun putting back together. Go around several times because you want to make sure nothing happens. There we go. Now we're going to take the window shield. It's called a window shield, like not windows glass, but it's a shield that comes off so you have access to the torque converter nuts. And we're going to remove that 8 millimeter socket. Two of them. Take that shield out of the way. And now we can see the flex plate, and we'll turn it so we can see the torque converter nuts. So now we have to turn the actual crank on the engine so that we can access each torque converter nut. So I have a 21 millimeter socket here and a ratchet. I'm using a 1/2-inch drive just to make it easier on me. And I'm going to put it right on that crank bolt. There we go. So now that I have that, I can look back at my window on the flex plate area, and we'll turn it until I see my first torque converter nut. And there she is right there. Now, this is where you're going to mark that with a crayon, and the reason is there is balancing to a torque converter and a flex plate where they mate. So we know that we want to put that back, starting with this one once we remove it. Let's get our socket. 14 millimeter socket right on that first torque converter nut. And try not to drop it down in. So we have one, and it's marked, so I'm going to turn the crank going clockwise, as you can tell, to go with the compression stroke on the engine. There's the second one. We don't need to mark it. No need to confuse. Let's put our 14 millimeter on there. There's 4 total. Here we go. Now that's the last one. And then you can turn your crank to confirm there's no more. See that dancing? That noise? That means that that torque converter is free from the flex plate. I'm going to undo the training lines. You could undo them at the transmission, but I'm lucky enough to have a cooler, so I have some rubber hoses here, and hopefully it'll make less of a mess. I have a catch basin underneath, but I'm going to use my hose pinchers just to pinch these lines to keep the transmission fluid from minimalizing the waste. And then I'm going to take the clamps off. Mine happen to be an 8 millimeter or a flathead screwdriver. And I'm going to loosen these clamps. I got a catch basin underneath because I'm sure I'm going to get some residual. It's just going to come right off. All right, now we can take those lines off. Here we go. I'm going to put caps on the end, so once again, keep the mess to a minimum. So now we're going to dismount the transmission mount to the transmission. This is torsion bar suspension, so we have 2 torsion bars under a heavy load. I'm not going to touch this cross member. That's what I'm trying to avoid by taking the motor mount bolts out of the transmission side and then on that mount side. 19 millimeter, like I said. You have to use a wrench. Nice. This also has the exhaust hanger bracket on it. That's loose enough that I can get a ratchet wrench in there and really spin that out. Let's get the other side free so we can do the same over there. All I did was put a little post jack, just lift that transfer case up a little bit, take the pressure off that mounting bolt. That way we're not ripping the threads out of the aluminum casing, and it comes right out. So now we're going to take our 2 lower stud, the nuts off those studs for that mount, 19 millimeter socket. Lift this transmission up more. See See if we can pull that mount right out. There we go. All right, so now I'm ready to set the transmission jack up on this transmission before I unbolt it from the engine block. So I have some wood to the front because this pan is a little shaped oddly, and I have 2 rubber hockey pucks in the back. First thing I like to do is let's snug it up. Okay, now I'm going to get my tie down and I'm going to swing it over the top of the transmission so that I can tie it tight to the actual jack so nothing goes to foul in the future. Just make sure you don't crush any lines or harnesses. That would be the key to that. There we go. And I'll run this ratchet strap right through here. All right, so let's take the shifter cable off, and I'm just going to pop it right off that lever, and now I have it free over here. We're just going to work this clip out like that. And then we could push down on the top tab and push down on that tab like that. Let's get this out of the way. Now I can set that aside. 15mm socket, and we have 4 main bolts from the bell housing to the engine block. There's one. They're just on there a little bit. Could stop the actual movement of the transmission. So now I'm over on the passenger side, and this one is really hard to see with the camera especially, but the bolt is actually mounts the transmission dipstick. So if you can't physically see it, follow that dipstick and you will find it right where it is. I had to break out the big guns. I got the 1/2-inch ratchet with the reducer for the 3/8. And now the last bolt on this side is real difficult to get to because, well, the transmission dipstick tube is in the way. Now we're going to take the dipstick out. Ford is nice enough to make it a split system, so that bracket's done. Now you can just grab it firmly and lift up. And you can see should be no mess, no fluid coming out, because the fluid shouldn't be that high. There it is. We'll let it come right down and out of the way. So now we're going to get the last bolt on the rear part of the bell housing. Same 15mm socket. All right, that's our last one facing this way. Well, I can reach up there, take it out. Now we're moving to the 2 in the front. Before we take the transmission bolt off this side, I'm going to now with my 50mm socket, I'm going to break free transmission bolt on the passenger side. Okay, broke it free. Let's get the ratchet. Now the last one is on the driver's side. I'm heading over there. All right, here's the last bolt on that bell housing. Last one. And now we can try to push that transmission back. So now all the bolts are out. I get to joyfully see if we can push this transmission back enough to get this pan out. It only has to come down, probably move back about 3 inches because we have to get this angle to come down. So let's see what we got. Don't forget that you have the torque converter studs going through the flex plate, which I just saw broke free. Might want to lower the tranny just a hair. So now I'm going to take the pan bolts down, 8mm socket, and I'm just going to work my way around. There is 16 total 8 on each side. And we'll just work our way all the way around. And then hopefully we can have enough clearance to get this pan out. I'm going to leave one in the middle of the pan on both sides. That way I can control the coming down. Might move over to the electric gun to go a little faster. Now we're on the driver's side. We're going to do the same over here, all except for the center bolt, and we'll go from there. But now the bolts are all out. All right, so now we're going to try to manipulate our half shield out of the way. It can be done. Just a little patience. Set it aside. So we're going to have to take the front Y pipe down before we get that transmission out the rest of the way. There's 4 studs coming from the manifold, 2 on both sides, and it's a 15mm socket. And we're just going to take these nuts right off. Do that to all 4. All right. Great news, I got enough room here. I could slide my hand up in here and get rid of those bolts for the flex plate to the crank, but before you do it, always mark. Anything that you're going to reuse, you got to check it and mark it so that it lines up with the same original balance. That's the idea behind that. And now we can go ahead and break it free. Now you're going to have to use something to go against because you don't want that crank spinning. So I've got my 21mm socket and my 1/2-inch breaker bar on the front crank, and I'm going to hold it while I break this free. I am just going to break all of them free, and then I can use my electric air ratchet to spin them out. Like I said, 6 total. Last one. Okay, we got all the bolts out and pull it back. Slide it out. So now in order to drop the pan, we have to remove the oil pump. And that is this, and the pickup screen is attached to the bottom of it. 1 bolt right here, 13mm socket. We're going to break that free. Now there is a long stem on there that goes up to the distributor drive shaft, which this doesn't have a distributor anymore, but it does have a crank position sensor that's mounted on the top of it. And now you can take the pan down with the pump in it. So just to show you why the actual pump drive and screen have to come down is because of this shield cutout that's in the oil pan. Now with everything out of the way, let's just grab this gasket and pull it right down and get it over with. You can see and also look at it and see just where it was, where it's faulty. Maybe it was over torqued, maybe it's just old. Okay, so you can get a scraper or a razor blade because this is a steel block, and you just want to clean all the gasket contact area and get all that old sludge right off there. Make sure you clean it good, right up to the max. Could take some time, but end product is how long and good the job becomes. And as you can see, this is not a job that you can do easily. So make sure you take your time and do it right. So before we put our pan back up in, with the gasket, you're going to put a speck of RTV in each corner. So it's basically wherever there's a crease. And in the front, you'll see where the timing cover meets. That's where you're going to put some RTV. So when I mean a smidge, like an eighth bead, not too much, because it will cause problems with the rubber gasket. You just want to get wherever oil can go through a crevice and cover it. So I'm going to put these little helpers in each 4 corners. They just thread right into the existing bolt holes, and they hold the gasket up, so when you put the pan up and bolt the pump up and torque it, the gasket doesn't fall down and get all dirty. It is a little cumbersome because the gasket will be hanging down in the center, and it makes it look a little harsh, but these have a flathead screwdriver on the tip of it you can use to tighten them up. I like to bottom them out because I want them to get the most out of them, holding the gasket up there as firm as possible. And then they have that little ear on them, and the pan itself, the metal will stick on that. We'll do the 2 in the front, and then we'll be ready to go. Now it's time to put our gasket up there, and on the gasket, the thicker part goes in the front of the pan. So that's going to be where the timing cover itself is mounted. There we go. All right. So now it's time to put our pump and screen in. The good news is our pan comes designed much better, so you don't have to have the pan there. You can take your time, set that pump up, bottom it out. Now the torque on this is 35 foot-pounds, so I'm just going to snug it and then get my torque wrench. 13 millimeter bolt, 35 foot-pounds. Right in here, the factory one is like this. That's why it won't come down. Ours, we make it wide, so you don't have to, you can conveniently put the pump back in. So you're going to line up your plastic push pins in with the bolt holes on the pan, all 4 of them, and then just push it up till it clicks. Get that little pop, and go to the front, do the same. Now you can let go. And the pan is resting. You can get your bolts and an 8 millimeter socket, get ready to put them in. So you have 16 bolts total. I cleaned them all up, and the 2 longer ones I set aside, those are the ones that go in the timing chain cover. So you can see the front nose of it, they're in the aluminum. That's where those 2 go. So the rest go into the pan. Now with our 8 millimeter socket, and I like to use a speed wrench, which is basically like an old corkscrew style, because I don't want to over tighten this. I want to get this seated and snug. And I'm going to go 1. I'm not even bottoming it out because of this gasket style. When you have any sort of gasket like this, you want to make sure you go slow and don't make it sandwich itself out. So we have 4 bolts left, and it's where all these little plastic guides were in. So now I'm just going to remove these and then put our final 4 bolts in. Then we'll torque it down in the proper sequence. So there's a special torque sequence, as you can see on the side of the screen, and the torque spec is 9 foot-pounds. So I'm all set, ready to go with my 8 millimeter, and I'm going to just start torquing them in sequence. Torquing is really important because if you over torque, things break. Okay, right up front. The last one, and now you're going to double check. You don't have to do it in the sequence. You can just go all the way around at 9 foot-pounds. So now we got to the point where the pan is in. We let it sit for a while. Everything's all dry, ready to go. I'm going to put the flex plate back. Now, normally, I would put that shield back, that big tin shield, because it goes all the way around. But because of the transmission being pulled back, these lines are in the way. So I have to put the flex plate back on, torque it, so that I can slide the transmission forward. Then I'll get wedge that little plate up in there behind this. So I'm going to line up my marks. I've got my yellow mark, and I've got my flex plate. It's also good to examine the flex plate while you have it out, because they're notorious to have little cracks on them. And I looked, and we don't have any. So I'm going to line up my yellow crayon mark, and then I'm going to, don't forget to put this washer in. It's kind of a tight spot. Once one bolt is in, it'll be a lot easier. There we go. Good. Get that one started. We'll get one more in. Last bolt going in. Okay. Here we go. Now let's see if we can snug them up and then torque them. All right, so we're back to the 17mm socket, and we're going to go in a back and forth motion like crisscross. I'm just going to bottom them out. See how it starts to pull itself in. Go to that top one. Let's get the torque wrench. All right, so now we have to torque that flex plate to the crank, and I need to hold the front harmonic balancer from turning, so I'm going to put my 21mm socket with my long ratchet and try to hold that while I torque down that flex plate. And the torque spec is 54 to 64 foot-pounds for the flex plate to crank. I'm going to go to 60, see how it feels. I'm going to be right in the middle. And do it in a crisscross pattern. So now we don't have to go in a star pattern, and I'm going to get to the easiest ones. Just confirm they're right at this right. Get to the 3 that I can reach. And now I will spin it. All right, now we're ready to push the transmission forward a little bit so we can put our shield in. All right, so now we're getting ready to line our transmission. Like I said, we're going to push it in. But make sure you line up that torque converter stud, the yellow marking, with the yellow mark on the flex plate. So I'm going to have to turn the crank until I see that bolt hole that has the yellow on it. And then as we push the training forward, we have to try to fish that through the bolt hole without damaging the torque converter. All right, so I know that the window on that pan is going to be right around here on my shield. So I'm going to move that flex plate right now with that yellow marker so it lines up here. There it is, right about there. And now I can reach in with my fingers inside the bell housing, inside the transmission, and just gently spin that torque converter till that stud lines up. Because it's right here, so we're just going to spin it just like this. And we're in the general area, so now we're going to leave it there. So now I'm going to lower my training jack just a hair. And my jack stand I have in the back. Bring that transfer case down. Now let's see where my angle is. There we go. That stud needs to go up about 3 inches. Right about there. And now I can put my shield in. Lines seem to be out of the way. This is the starter cutout, which is on the driver's side. This one and this one are the two sleeves that go on those little bump out sleeves on the transmission. So I'm going to put that opening right on the flex plate side and go up just like this. Connect this side, bring it up enough, connect that side. There we go. Beautiful. And you can see everything's almost lined up. We just need to drop it down a hair, and we'll go for it. So on the transmission, there are 4 of these and 2 long ones. The 2 longer ones, it's only by like a ½ inch, go from the engine side towards the transmission. Now do not tighten them up, but if you get a chance to start one, I recommend doing it. Just get it in there and hand start it, because you have to have that torque converter bolt through that flex plate before you tighten those. If not, you will damage the transmission pump. Can't say that enough. So now that we have 1 bolt in the housing to stop that plate from falling down, I'm going to put my 21mm back on my crank bolt, and I'm going to turn the flex plate just enough, hopefully, to get that stud to line up. And I'm going to go either way. I'm going to try to get that torque converter stud to line up. Because even just a little bit of pressure on that torque converter plate will damage it. Okay, it's lined up right now, but I can feel that I need to lift that transmission up and tilt it a little bit to the driver's side. But we're almost there. Now I'm going to put the other long bolt by the starter, put it through, see if I can get that transmission to start. And I think I see the torque converter studs lining up. I do. Yep, I can see 2 studs have gone through. Yep, and this one's 3, so that means all 4 will go through. Now I'm going to snug up my 2 mounting bolts here on the side. And as the transmission pulls in, the torque converter studs will come right through that flex plate. All right, now I have my 15mm socket, and I am going to go back and forth and snug my mounting bolts up. Keep going back and forth. Check on those studs, make sure they're being pulled through. Mine are. Because if they're not, like I said, you will damage that transmission pump seal and pump. So you'll take that whole transmission out again. Now here we go. We're going to start putting the last 4 bolts in. This bell housing to block. I have a 15mm swivel on 2 very long extensions. They're just 24-inch extensions. And I just have a little stubby ratchet because I'm just going to start them. All right, so now I'm on the driver's side. I'm going to put this bolt in. Snug it up. And I have the one on the top right at 12 o'clock. All right, I'm going to slide it through. Make sure it goes through that vent tube bracket. So you're going to line up that hole. Maybe push it around a little bit. There we go. Now the last one has the transmission dipstick on it, so we have to, I'm going to torque all of these, and then I'm going to put the dipstick tube in. So now I'm going to torque all the bell housing bolts except for that one that mounts the dipstick tube, and that's because you cannot get to the one around like 3 o'clock on the passenger side of the bell housing with that tube in. So I'm going to torque everything, and then I'll put that one in last. Torque bell housing to engine block is 44 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to go over to the passenger side. All right, now we can torque it. All right, so now we're going to put that transmission dipstick tube in, and I'm going to bring it up on the side of the exhaust. It's got that little bit of the tube sticking out of the transmission. I'll line that up. Seems to be a hose or something up there. I'm going to go around the side of it. That lined right up. There we go. Okay, last bolt, we're going to torque that to 44 foot-pounds. All right, so now we're going to jack this transmission up. It's fully mounted. It's nice and tight. I'm going to jack it up and put that training mount back on that cross member. So here we go. We're going to put our training mount in. Try to line up the two holes. Let's see if it stands up. There it does. Perfect. I'm just going to put the nuts in. Just hand tight. And then don't forget the bracket for the exhaust. There's a little exhaust bracket on the side here that goes into that hanger. And it bolts down with the bracket. So there's a little hanger that goes like this. I'm going to put it on the exhaust. So the hanger looks like it goes in this way because you can see the marks of where the mount sat. So let's get that rubber bushing in like that. And let's just work this in. There we go. Set this back up. I'm going to lower the jack just a little bit. All right. Let's get the bolt in the training side started at least by hand. All right, so now I'm going to put the bolt on that exhaust hanger, and then I'm going to hand tighten it, move the exhaust around a little bit. There we go. Get it to go into that transmission. Start it by hand. let's see if we can get a torque wrench in there. So the 2 bolts to the transmission mount to the back of the transmission, 19 millimeter socket, and it's 49 foot-pounds. So now I'm going to lower this trainee jack and let that mount sit right on the cross member. And 19 millimeter socket. I'm just going to snug them up. And I'll get my torque wrench, torque it to 72 foot-pounds. Now we're going to put this cross shield on, line the bolt holes up, put one nut in. On the back side is a plate that has little speed nuts in it, just like the one I have in my hand. So it looks like this. You just have to put your hand up in there, line it up. That's a 10 millimeter socket. There's 2 on the other side. We'll do the same on that side. So before you put the drive shaft back up, clean the old bolt threads because they have the old thread sealer in it, and then you got to clean them and apply a new amount. And all you need is a little tab. I'm using medium strength, and I'm going to do that to all 4 in the front and 4 in the rear. So now we're going to line the drive shaft to the transfer case, and don't forget to line up your crayon mark with the yoke to the transfer case. I've got 1 bolt right here, ready to go. There's my yellow mark on both, lined up. Start everything by hand. Now I'm going to do the same to the back. So now we're going to line up the rear drive shaft with the yoke and that yellow mark. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, so I see my yellow mark there. There she is. There it is. All right, let's put one in. Okay, now I'm going to put my 12 millimeter 12-point socket on there, and I'm going to snug these up. And always go in a crisscross pattern, just to make sure it's seated. Now we'll move to the front. $83 foot-pounds. Okay, so now we're going to reattach our transmission lines. We're going to take those caps off. There we go. Make sure the clamp is on there. Put that hose on. for the other one. Here's an 8mm socket, and we're just gonna snug up these clamps. You could also use a flathead screwdriver. You can tell that the factory clamps are missing on the to hold these together, so I'll probably get some wire ties and just tie them up, stop them from rattling. Release these hose grippers. All right, so I got some wire ties. I'll just throw these in here. Like I said, this is just going to stop these from rattling around, rubbing next too close to each other and causing a leak or a havoc. And I'm just going to cut the excess off. All right, so now we're going to hook up our shifter cable again. Let's just run it through that bracket and then let it click on. And you can see that hasn't moved, so we line that up, push it on, and you see the clean part right here? That's the adjustment. So I'm going to bring it right back to where the dirt starts. Right there. See it clean? It moved. Bring it right back to where the dirt starts and then lock the clip in. You're good to go. All right, so now we're going to use a pole jack to jack the front differential back up into the mounts. And let's just see how fast it goes up in there. There we go. Got that one in, lined up. I'm just going to grab the bolt real quick. Slide that right through. Put that nut on the other side with that hook. Start it by hand. Nice. And then we get this one with the big washer. Line that right up. Just jack it up some more. The nut is on top. You can see it, feel it. There you go. And we have that one in the top, way in the back. It's just like the passenger side. The bolt, we're going to slide the bolt right through. And then put that locking nut on the back. So now that cross bolt, that's really hard to see. This is the actual nut for it. And the only way to really get in there is a pair of long needle nose. And it's in front of the axle. If you can weasel that up in there. And then it literally, with a little bit of the eye, you can kind of see the end of the stud. And we're going to see if we can put this on. So 13mm, I got that lock nut started. Just bottom it out. I'm going to tighten up the other two, all 13mm sockets. And then I have the one on the other side. And then last one over here. And then we'll torque them to factory spec. So all 4 mounting bolts for that front differential are 49 foot-pounds. So just no particular sequence, 13mm. And the last one is this one. So now we can put our front drive shaft in, and the yellow mark is lined up right here, and there's my yellow mark on my cap. So we'll push it in because the drive shaft got shrunk a little bit. Let it rest right on that little notch. You have a notch. There we go. There's the notch, and the cap sits on it. And go get your caps. Now I've cleaned the bolts already, And I've put a little thread locker on it because that's the way they come from the factory. There it is right there. I just put the medium strength. And I marked one yellow, so I'm going to put that one there. So I'll put the top one on first. And this is that T30 Torx bit. I would love to say you could get like a 10 millimeter on that hex, but I know better. It's kind of difficult sometimes at the angle. Just snug it because the torque spec is only 14 foot-pounds. So 14 foot-pounds, and we are going to torque this. Now we're going to put our nuts on our torque converter studs that come through that flex plate. Just so you know, all manufacturers, especially Ford, strongly recommends new lock nuts because they stretch, so you don't want them coming apart. So I have that 21 millimeter on the crank. I'm going to turn it till I get to my window right there. And once it's on the window, I can start the nut. Now you're not going to be able to put it all the way down because, well, it's a locking nut, so it has that oblong shape to it. And it's just really difficult. But you can start it a couple of turns, which is perfect. Get it so it's at least on there, not hitting anything, because we're going to turn this torque converter completely around before we start tightening or torquing. We're going to put all four on. All right, now we can start tightening and torque it down. So it is a 14 millimeter socket, and the torque spec is 26 foot-pounds. So we're still going to have to hold it once it bottoms out and starts to turn with the 21 millimeter on that harmonic balancer, the crank bolt. Last one. So now we're going to put that shield up, and as you can see, kind of has a angle to it. Can't mess that up. It goes on one way. Two bolts, they're little 6 millimeter bolts with a 8 millimeter head on them. So you can use an 8 millimeter socket or a ratchet wrench. All right, so now we're going to snug up our exhaust, mount it, take that flange, line it up with the studs. Might have to wiggle it to get it to seat. It's not uncommon. There we go. Make sure the flange is on the other side before you put the nuts on. Hand start the nuts. 15 millimeter socket, and we're going to snug these up on both sides. It's 4 nuts total. I recommend going back and forth so it seats properly. And now we'll get the torque gun. Torque spec is 30 foot-pounds. Do the same to the other side. Okay, so now obviously before I put the starter in, I'm going to take that oil filter out because the obvious part is that when you change a oil pan, you got to drain all the oil. So you should do the filter at the same time so it's a complete oil change. I didn't do it earlier because I didn't want the oil dripping on me. So we'll drain the filter, take the filter down, put a new one on before we add the oil. So we'll drain that, clean that surface, then we'll put the new oil filter on. Now I'm going to clean that surface. I primed up my oil filter already, and I put some fresh oil on the rubber seal, because that's the proper way to do it. And it's just nicer to do this now before the starter goes in. Once it bottoms out, just give it a nice quarter turn. There we go. So before I reattach my starter, I like to clean the actual connectors. I have a brass brush here. You can use sandpaper, but I just want to get any corrosion or grease off. You want to make a good contact, right? There's no worse sound than hearing click, click. Make sure you get both sides. So I like to put the starter in first, then I'll put the wires on. I'm not going to mount it though, I'm just going to place it in here. Set it up like that. Put my starter wire on the positive first. That solenoid wire stayed right in the position because it has that little hook on it. Bottom it out, just give it a tweak. You don't want to over tighten it because it will break that stud that goes into that starter. And now we'll tighten up the positive wire. So I'm going to turn my starter. Let's see if I can get this wire to turn before I snug it up in the position it's going to be at, which is right like that. Like that. Same with the other wire. Snug it up. Now the wires are all clear from each other, not touching. Let's turn the starter around and get it mounted. So then now that we have our starter seated up in there, we can grab our mounting bolts and line them up. There we go. They're all the same length, so there is no change on that. We'll just hand start all of them. There we go. Now I'm going to get my long extension and a 13mm swivel. So the torque spec is from 15 to 20 foot-pounds. I'm going to go with the max. I'm going to go right to 20 foot-pounds, 13mm socket. We'll snug these up. So the last thing I'm going to do before I lower this and add the oil is all new pans, I don't care, always check the torque on that because you want to be the last one that touched it. Manufacturer says 10 foot-pounds. Well, that's pretty good. So now that we've lowered the vehicle, we got a couple more things left to do, and that is one, I'm going to put the transmission dipstick right back in that tube. I didn't lose any training fluid, but if you did, please run it to the proper temperature and check the level. Now I'm going to add my oil. The oil fill cap is on the passenger valve cover on this vehicle. Go ahead and remove it. I'm going to get a funnel, and it calls for 520, so I'm going to put 4.5 quarts of 520 oil. So here's the last quart, a half a quart though, because it's 4.5 total. I'm going to remove our funnel, set it aside. Now we can connect our negative battery cable. And like I said, this is a universal terminal end, which happens to be a 13mm socket or wrench. Doesn't matter, your factory one should be at 8mm. And now you're all set. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. the only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.